England has eased its regulations for international travel. There's previously been criticism of the so-called traffic light system from both holidaymakers and the industry, which said it was too complicated. Our correspondent Nui Jabakel is at London's Heathrow Airport. So, Nui, tell us about these changes that have just been announced.
Yeah, we've been waiting weeks for this. It was expected in the last few days. It's just come out as we were going on air. Grant Shapps, the UK's Transport Secretary, tweeting the news. Let me tell you, three major headlines really for me here. First of all, in terms of red list countries being removed from the red list, of 8 of them in total, including Turkey, Pakistan, a country which lots of people in the UK will have familial ties to. There are also popular tourist destinations like Sri Lanka, as well as Bangladesh, Egypt and Kenya. Now, the other major change is that there'll no longer be an amber classification in the traffic light system. Those 8 countries coming off next Wednesday on the 22nd of September, and then a few days later on the 4th of October, the traffic light system will essentially be scrapped. There'll only be a red list, and whatever else is around the world will be green and safe for travel. Now, that means that because after this latest change, there will still be more than 50 countries on the red list, which isn't going to be too much good news for the travel industry, and we'll touch upon that in a second, because the last change that's been announced here by Grant Shapps has been testing as well. PCR test. There's been a lot of complaints by people here in the UK that they're very expensive, that it's going to essentially price people out of holidays, especially now that the October half-term school holidays are coming. A big chance for the industry and for people to get away after about a year and a half of restrictions around the COVID-19 pandemic. From the end of October, so further down the line in just over a month's time, there will be no more PCR tests for people who are double vaccinated. Instead, they'll have to take lateral flow tests when coming to the UK. Much cheaper, although experts say they're not as accurate. Now let's talk about the business aspect. I think there's going to be a lot of concern about this. 54 countries, as I said, still on the red list, not safe to travel after these latest changes, and that's going to mean bad news for the travel and tourism industry. There were reports here in UK media that up to half of the 62 countries on the red list will be made safe to travel. That appears that it's not happened. Grant Shapps says the UK government taking a public health approach here, and so far their travel restrictions have eased very cautiously. But in terms of the business impact, last month Heathrow Airport saw 2.2 million passengers pass through it in August. That's the busiest it's been since the pandemic spread around the world last year, but it's still down 70%, 71% on pre-pandemic levels, on 2019 levels for August here. And what it means is that they're losing a lot of ground on other parts of Europe, other hubs around the world which are opening up much quicker. Amsterdam was the busiest in Europe last month, but other places like Paris, Frankfurt are also ploughing ahead, while here in Heathrow, because of these restrictions, John Holland-Kaye, the chief executive, says they're still not able to do business to the extent that they'd like to. Robin.
So, Nui, travel opening up to a degree then, but there is still concern about infection rates over the coming winter.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, Grant Shapps saying that their priority and what's driving all of this is public health, and that's why they've been so cautious. We've been hearing about vaccine passports in other parts of Europe. Here in the UK, Wales says it's going to introduce them from the 11th of October. What it will mean is that people will have to show a COVID vaccination certification or passport, or they'd need to show a negative test within 48 hours in order to enter certain places. They'll include places like nightclubs, indoor venues with more than 500 people not sitting down, outdoor venues with more than 4,000 people as well. And there's been lots of opposition to this in Wales and in other parts of the UK from businesses, as you'd expect, the nightlife industry, saying it's going to be bad news for them when they've just reopened in recent months, but also from a lot of politicians and lawmakers who've criticised the ruling Labour Party there and its leader, Mark Drakeford, saying there are legal concerns around this and ethical concerns as well. But really what Mark Drakeford says is that this is a bit of pain now in order to not have more restrictions further down the line, because the winter months are coming and concerns are growing all across the UK about a possible possible rise in cases. If you look at the latest daily figures just out again in the past hour, it says another 178 deaths in the UK, 32,500 cases, and interestingly, more than 8,000 people currently in the UK in hospital with COVID. And that's the big one for the government. Deaths and hospitalizations were the key metric for them in terms of how much they restrict society in those sorts of lockdowns that we've been hearing about. The plan A for the government is to trust the vaccination program. More than almost 45 million people here have now received both doses of a COVID vaccine, and according to the Health Secretary Sajid Javid, they are working. Plan A is to stick on that route, but Plan B will be more restrictions, more COVID passports for the rest of the UK, and possibly even lockdown light. So what's being dubbed as lockdown lights are going back into lockdown, which, if hospitalizations continue to rise, could be on the horizon here in the UK. Robin, Jamie.
Nui Jabakal, thanks very much.